Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well,
Good.
thank you, thank
Good.
you. We will have to pursue some current events and see if we can find a good story.
Yes.
It's easier finding bad stories, but that's not much fun. So, but we're convinced that if the country and the politicians and the bureaucrats and the people would just do the right thing, things wouldn't be so bad. But that's an old story, and of course I think that's the history of the world and the history of people doing the right thing and the wrong thing and trying to figure out what the results are and see if it really makes a difference. But we do want to talk about what's going on in the COVID world and in the testing world of COVID. We've talked a lot about the testing and the shortcomings of the testing, and but now it's more in the financing of it and how much it costs and how many times this is happening and what might happen in the future. But it looks like it's totally out of control. A test right now, the way I understand it, is that it could cost, to manufacture, could cost $20, which probably is a lot for the company, or it could be $850.
Oh, that's a Cadillac.
But the median price was $129. But I don't think anybody really pays for this. I think most of the time is that, I shouldn't say nobody's paying for it. It's all of us paying for it, and there's no limits. But you know, the article we looked at on this, which is it came from the dossier. It was presented as well. I thought the name was neat. The COVID Testing Industrial Complex.
Yeah,
Take off on the military industrial complex, because I also think, and we've used this, at least I have, the medical industrial complex. Well, this would be the testing part of the medical industrial complex, but you know, I think this sort of supports my old time saying, and somebody else invented the saying, but that is, if you subsidize something, that is, get something, some unrealistic benefit, you're going to get more of it. And sometimes I think you could apply that to immigration. You subsidize immigration and you're going to get it. You know, if you get the carpet rolled out for you in the free citizenship and you get in front of the line, you tend to get a lot of people coming and a lot of problems with it. But you know, the other thing is when you factor in the inflationary problem with a lot of cash and a lot of money, people are going to do things, whatever they can to make more money. But this isn't like 2 or 3 companies. There's 2 or 3 well-known, but evidently there were 100 different projects that were sort of given approval to go ahead and do this. So you know that anybody that it's sort of like the dot-com bubble. You know, if you go, I'll do it, and they get money up front. It just is a real boondoggle. And now it's in the midst of, you know, all the articles coming out, and they're talking about, you know, shutdown killed more people than the virus, and they're really questioning, you know, the efficacy of the vaccines. So there's a lot of questions unanswered, but this is on top of it. It looks like a lot of money has been spent, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but later on we'll want to talk a little bit about some of the reported medical complications that are cropping up, and that's really odd about the people. Just like when they did this and had the kids in school, they cared about the children, and they put the mask on the children. It turns out, look at the medical problems that happened. So there's a medical downturn, and nobody right now has any proof that all that mischief in the last year saved lives. So that's the thing that they had to contend with, and yet, you know, the people who pass out the propaganda have been very successful. The American people are very intimidated, and they want to do what's right. And so our job is big to try to get people to look at different information too. But I think the trend is coming our way on this, and more people are asking questions.
The article is written by Jordan Schachtel, and his Substack is called The Dossier. And he does, I think, some of the best work, and I urge people who are interested to certainly support him if you can. He does some of the best writing on COVID that's out there. And I like this article. It caught my attention yesterday because I like the way he breaks it down. He takes it away from the emotion and the fear and the psychological aspect, and he looks at it like crony capitalism, which is what it is, which is corporatism. As you point out, the FDA has cleared well over 100 entities for emergency use to deploy these tests. Median cost, as you say, about $129 per test. That's only the cost of the test. That's not the cost of collecting, of sticking that thing into your brain and all that. That's not involved, so there's extra money on that. But what Jordan does that's so helpful is he just breaks down the math. And he says we do about 2 million COVID tests a day in the U.S. at about, that's about $254 million a day generated simply by these tests. 7.6 billion a month, $91.4 billion a year generated by testing Americans. And he points out that's more cash than is generated by Boeing, Intel, FedEx, or even Facebook.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's an enormous amount of money, and there's fear being used. People are being tested because they're afraid. There's intimidation. There are people that are not allowed to go to their jobs, not allowed to go to the airport without being tested. So you have all this pushing in there, and then you have this industry over the past year that's cropped up that's unbelievably, fabulously wealthy based on this, and you have a recipe for some real problems. And hats off to him for pointing it out.
You know, this has been going on just a short period, relatively speaking. It's this past year, and a lot of money was spent, and they never proved that the test has been accurate, and yet they're basing everything on a test that people still question. At the same time, they spend all this money on it, and there's all this testing going on, and it blows my mind to think about what may well and could happen, and that is if they can do that much mischief with a virus that doesn't kill a lot of people, which means you don't dismiss it, but you try to put it in perspective, especially if the doctors and the politicians are going in the wrong direction, and the treatment's worse than the disease, and that's pretty bad. So what happens when they do after this experimentation is with these vaccines, this RNA business? What happens if that is participating in the variant? I have no idea if that's true, but it just seems to me that if I were the scientist, I'd be worried about that and want to know more about it. But I understand that Fauci really believes in variants and how dangerous they are. But they have to, especially since the mood right now is moving in the direction of skepticism about the last year's all the lockdowns, and people are saying, it was overkill. They just did too much. So I think this industry, which now is very large, I don't think they have a plan to go, especially. What if it really is true that they might be working the vaccine into the passport system?
Oh yeah.
Show me your card, show me your papers, show me your blood.
Yeah.
That to me, that is a big change in attitude. Yeah, we may get over the silly things that they did all this past year, and maybe they might even decide that people should go back to work, but that's very, very slow. So I think they're preparing to keep us on edge, keep the people on edge, and keep the people very, very obedient. And if you don't listen, you're liable to get punished.
Yeah, indeed. And let's look at this first clip because this encapsulates what you're saying. This is Andy Slavitt. He is the top COVID advisor to President Biden, and he's also a rabid lockdown. He makes Fauci look like a COVID skeptic. Let's leave it up there for a second. He's a rabid lockdowner. He's a rabid masker. He's a rabid tester. So he retweeted this article from The Atlantic. How to test every American for COVID-19 every day. I mean, that is the dream of these companies. And they can take it down now. And so Shackle also talks about profits. So this is how much money is generated. But let's talk about just pure profits. And he uses as an example Quest, which gets about 20% of the COVID test business across the country. They get $42 profit per test. He says that comes out to $26 million a day, $780 million a month, 9.3 billion profits in a year. $9.3 billion in profits for the year. So you know, Dr. Paul, you were up there on the Hill for a while. That was $9.3 billion. A lot of that's going to go to lobbyists, lobbying for more tests, more tests. You can't do anything without tests. And that's what's happening. That's what's going to happen. And in fact, there's pressure for even more tests. I don't want to continue to talk about my family, but my son got a notice from A&M. You've got to get a COVID test to step foot on campus, and they encourage everyone to get tested frequently. So you've got 60,000 kids getting tested, quote, frequently. What is that, every week or something? You've got a lot of tests, and as you point out, the accuracy problems have not been solved. The PCR threshold has not been solved. There's no standardized PCR threshold. So we know even the New York Times said 90% of the tests positive may be false positive. So we don't know, but we're generating billions of dollars. We're sucking a huge chunk out of the economy and putting them into these well-connected companies, and it's not doing any good.
Schachtel even brings up the subject, which not many people will do, that the principle they're violating is, why are we testing healthy people who are perfectly healthy and they have no symptoms? There's no reason to treat them, and it's back to this fear mongering, and it's back to this whole thing that they want to be able to control people. So I think that is one thing that's going to be with us for a while and cause a lot of problems. But this whole idea of searching for something that isn't there, and really in many ways we've been searching for something even this past year that there's more and more uncertainties. If you concede that, yes, it's there, we know some people died and all, but is it exactly as they describe it?
Yeah.
And I do want to bring up some statistics a little bit on, somebody made some reports on how many people are dying from the vaccine.
Yeah, let's move on to that topic, because it's
okay.
the VAERS. This is the CDC's adverse reaction count. So this is the CDC numbers and voluntarily reporting of adverse effects of the COVID, of the various different, you say vaccines, they're not exactly vaccines, but
they've been doing this, and there's a bunch. The numbers are varying, and they warn you this because they're changing.
Yeah, every week they update it. Yeah.
But there's an organization, the initial is VAERS, which happens to be Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System.
Yeah.
CDC.
Yeah.
So it isn't like we had one scientist who was sort of overly independent and he's come up with it. This comes from the CDC. And this number, and you may have a number that's slightly off, but it could be as high as 1,600 deaths from the vaccines.
In the U.S.
A lot of people know already about the famous athletes who have died from it out of their goodwill they were trying to demonstrate. But that is a lot. I mean, how many people have died from the virus? A lot of people. They have huge numbers, but there's always qualification. Well, they were in a nursing home and they had a stroke, and all the other things. Whether that was the prime reason or not, we don't know. But there's reports that it could be 5,000 or 6,000 had other adverse reactions. So that gets to be a real problem, especially since they don't understand it, because these vaccines are not understood. There are 390 cases of Bell's palsy, which usually you recover from. That's the paralysis of the facial nerve, but you can have it permanent too.
Wow, yes.
So it means the vaccine is capable of infecting a nerve to make you temporarily paralyzed, and then who knows what's happening, because how many people had this, have the shot, and 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later they have some symptoms. That's not going to be automatically reported. So we really don't know exactly what that's doing. But when you total up the events reported to the CDC about adverse reaction, it's over 30,000 of these. That seems to be that they should slow up. But they have slowed up a little bit. They'll remove something from the market, said we better study it some more, and they come back 2 weeks later, and the people who make the drug and happen to be making some profits from it, they say, well, we've checked it out, and it's not a big,
fine.
it's not a big deal, so we can go back to using it.
Yeah, and again, we're not telling people what to do, but this does need to be studied. It should be taken into consideration when you're making tough decisions. Let's look at this next chart. This is, as you say, every week the new numbers come out. Every Friday, I think it is, the new numbers come out. And these are vaccine adverse events marked as died. And the orange are from the VAERS forms where people voluntarily list the outcomes. And the blue are the numbers provided separately by the CDC without the VAERS records indicated. And so you're having, as of 22nd March, the blue line is 2,216 dead from the vaccine. So certainly it's something to think about and to take into consideration. But I think, didn't you have something about the profits made by the vaccine companies?
Yeah, well, there's plenty of that. And Bob Wamsell reported a specific case. He talked about the German.
Oh, yeah.
German
More
case,
cronyism.
the crony aspect of COVID-19 panic. And that once again shows that it encourages people to do bad things or dumb things. And in this case, this might, well, I think people assume this has contributed to Merkel's problems.
Yeah.
Is some of people in the administration, obviously, it's turned out to be a big scandal. And, it wouldn't go over so well in this country. If that ever happened in this country, boy, would the administrators of our government be torn, because you have to hate China. But they say, here they said that the mask that they were buying and bootlegging came from China, so they were in business with the Chinese.
It is a big scandal, and Merkel's own CDU party has been hit particularly hard. And you think about the crony aspect of this, because the German government mandates masks. Get a mask, get a mask. Everyone's buying masks. Wear a mask everywhere. Well, it turns out that at least two of her MPs, Nicholas Lobel and Georg Nusslein, they're making some big bucks on the side. Lobel got 250,000 euros commission, his company did, from mask sales. And Nusslein, he's no slacker, 660,000 euros, his company, which helped sew in the deal to import a bunch of these masks, these massive face masks. So there's so much cronyism, there's so much corporatism, there's so much flat-out corruption going on that you see it worldwide, and this in Germany is really embarrassing Merkel and the CDU-CSU coalition.
Once you get the government involved in medicine, the medical care worsens. The medical care has not been much reassurance to the people. And then you get into these financial things. But they've been around for a while. This is just making it much worse, because a lot of people from libertarian conservative circles have said, the drug companies, have a mill there. They come on there on the FDA, and then they go and work for the drug companies. And if you can hold back or move something up along, it can make millions, if not billions of dollars profit for the drug companies. So they know something about it. And like you say, it's a lot of that money is just going to go into some very rich lobbyists who know the ropes up in Washington.
Yeah. Well, we want to move on. I have a couple of studies I was going to put up there. I think I sent you something on one of them, if you're ready to have a look at some of those.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, put up the first clip. This is a study that that just came out. I think it's just a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken. SARS-CoV-2 and the role of airborne transmission, a systematic review. And what it is a review of all the literature about the airborne transmission of the virus. Let's go to the next clip, because this is important to point out. This study was funded by the World Health Organization, so it's not a rogue study. What they did is they reviewed all of the literature about airborne transmission, which is critical, because that is what everything is based on. The masks, the social distancing, everything is based on this idea that there's an airborne transmission. Here's an interesting conclusion, the preliminary conclusion after reviewing all the literature. Let's look at this next one, and I did highlight it in yellow. The lack of recoverable viral cultural samples of SARS-CoV-2 prevents firm conclusions over airborne transmission. And that's pretty amazing. This is a WHO-funded study that says we can't really confirm, as I understand it, I'm not a scientist, we can't really confirm this whole airborne transmission thing is really a thing.
So even the people that we complain about, CDC and WHO, they probably have more decent reporting than those who take the information from them to make their political point. I think that's what happens, and they can pick and choose, and they frequently do that and ignore it and report it as they want to. There was another one that you had mentioned, Daniel. This is the Virginia judge refuses to shut down restaurant, and he defied the governor's edicts, and then he had to take it to court. And he found a judge in Virginia that ruled in his favor. So there's some cheering there, but it was also concluded by so far.
Yeah, so far.
So, but the state will probably appeal that then and still try to close them down. All to close down somebody that has done no harm. Probably the people that have come to his restaurant are better off than the ones who stayed at home. Statistically, that's probably a true statement. Yeah. You know, if there was more harm done staying in lockdown in your home than it is if you get out and socialize a little bit.
Yeah, and he runs Gourmelts in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I consider someone like that a hero who stands up and understands that he's going to get hit from all sides. He just refused to close, and he did find a decent judge, so for now, he's in good shape. But I want to just put another study up there, Dr. Paul, if you don't mind, because this is important because now we are getting more data. There is more science, and here's a new study, COVID-19 Lockdown Policies and Interdisciplinary Review, and it's done by, it was written in February, Oliver Robinson, University of Greenwich, and it's all about lockdowns, and this is kind of an update from yesterday, but if you go to the next one, here's really the important point that it found, and I apologize for this not being highlighted. But this is a great sentence, Dr. Paul. Tell me what you think of this. Lockdowns are associated with reduced mortality in epidemiological modeling studies, but not in studies based on empirical data from the COVID-19 pandemic. It goes on to say, in fact, the opposite seems to be the case. But isn't that amazing? The modeling showed that it would work, but golly gee, in real life, it really didn't because of all these factors. Psychological factors, stresses, the things we talked about yesterday, conditions not being treated, depression and suicide. So
yes, and the young people especially are being penalized for this. So it's bigger than we even imagine. Even those of us who try to point out these dangers and be careful and read and make your decision, I think the problems are going to be huge as time goes on. It's not going to end next month because there's always going to be another virus or something come along. So, and then the penalty. What about the penalty of paying for this?
Yeah.
Nobody pays for anything anymore. There's a limit to that, and it's mixed in there with the Federal Reserve mischief and causing a downturn anyway. So it's utterly amazing that this thing goes along, but people say, yes, it will go along and even benefit a certain group of people, but then the other ones, just like medically speaking, the kids have suffered more than some others, know. So it's going to penalize some. And then people will say, oh, yes, we got to take care of that. We got to take care of them. We need equity. We need equality. Yeah, what they want is equality of everybody suffering together.
Yeah. Except the elites.
Yeah, the elites. The elites, I would say, do pretty well. They still believe in guns as long as they're protecting their compound. So anyway.
Well, I'll close with an update here. And that is, let's look at this next clip. You remember, Dr. Paul, just 3 weeks ago, when Governor Abbott said, I'm going to remove my mask mandate, and our good friend Lena Hidalgo, the judge up in Harris County, she flipped out. She just went nuts. She couldn't handle it. They slammed Abbott's decision to lift the mask mandate, and this is on March 2nd. Let's look at the next one. Here's a quote from good old Lena. Here's what she had to say. Removing the mask order, even with associated messaging that urges voluntary compliance, sends wrong and confusing signals that masking is not important, not effective, or that the virus is under control. So now, 3 weeks out with the mask mandate gone, we should expect to see Texas in a terrible state, according to Lena Hidalgo and the maskers. Let's look at the latest chart from Texas. Uh-oh, it didn't go like they said. This is the latest 7-day moving average, 2,556 cases. It's the lowest since June 17th. The end of the mask mandate announced 3 weeks ago. We waited 2 weeks, and now what happened? Hospitalizations still declining. And then 29% single vax, 15% fully vaxxed. The numbers are not going Lena Hidalgo's way. So there you have it.
There's the evidence. They should all reassess this right now and decide that maybe the lockdown was a mistake.
Yeah,
And,
maybe we need to
I
lock
think,
down Lena.
You know, my argument is that common sense is a pretty good substitute for this, and a lot of people have used common sense over the many years because they didn't have so many vaccines to choose from. They didn't have these trillions of dollars being spent in the medical industrial complex, which is a shame, and that's sort of the real tragedy when you have government this way. You always have problems with medical disease and taking care of people, how you take care of poverty, and how you have full employment. But I tell you what, the more we depend on and believe that all we have to do is look to the government. The government is there to take care of us, to make us safe and keep us safe and secure and give us medical care and give us our education, which because things aren't going well. But the whole fallacy is the problems they're trying to solve were created by the government. The government is the problem. I think a famous president once said that. The government causes these problems. How can you go and do it? It's sort of like we've mentioned so often. How can you solve these problems if the economy has a problem with too much spending and too much printing of money? How can we solve this problem by just creating, now we're up to 7 or 8 and 3 trillion more coming down the pipeline, and that's all we're going to solve these problems. And the more people believe the distortions about how many people are going to suffer, like Hidalgo, if they believe her, they'll say more face masks. Let's give more. We need to get more controls, more lockdown. But I think sanity will break out once again. It is breaking out. People are waking up. Some of our local schools, as bad as they have been, are starting to lighten up a little bit. But you know, this whole thing, but it's a sort of a silly season, because even the CDC, I think this is the silliest thing I ever heard, that they have discovered that the virus, you know, the virus would never jump more than, you know, 6 feet. So we just separate everybody. And lo and behold, now they've decided it's 3 feet that is safe and secure. One of the reasons they changed that is they found out that the schools, they had different reasons why some didn't want to open, but one of them was, well, you've ruined the classrooms. It's 6 feet. We can't even get the kids in the room, and they think that doesn't matter. So, but the difference between 3 and 6, I don't think the virus has really checked that out at all. I think what we need to know is that sometimes looking toward health matters, which are commonplace, and good common sense on how one takes care of himself would go a lot further than dependent on the government for medical care and everything else. And that in that case, what you have is you have a lot of people doing things and finding out that, oh yeah, it is true. The more you subsidize something, the more you get of it. And sometimes, most of the time, they're subsidizing something else. And they also have to realize that just creating the money creates spending, but you can't tell where it's going. It's called malinvestment. And that's why probably we're sitting on a powder keg right now. Not only we can see it in the medical system right now, but the rest of it, the trillions and trillions of dollars, is just sitting there because all the decisions were made wrongly by government, by regulations, by a tax code, and they're sitting there because they didn't have the information they needed, like interest rates. So this is going to continue to contribute. So it isn't smart just to think of the danger of viruses and the lockdown, which is very important, but that isn't the basic cause. It's government interference in our lives, in the economy, in medicine that does it. But you can't start by people waking up and saying, you know, I'm beginning to believe those guys are right. Lockdown didn't do any good, and we're going to start shifting and go away from it. But then you have to say, well, if we're going to deny the ability of government to run our lives, what are we going to do? Oh, you might have to run your life yourself. Make your own decision. Be responsible. You might have to deal in that manner, make all the difference. It's your life, it's not the government's life. And it's your dollar. That's why the government shouldn't tell you how to spend it. And certainly, we have enough problems in this country, and we have a border problem in this country. For us to pretend to be in 150 countries and telling other countries how to run and make sure they don't violate any civil liberties, well, we ought to look to ourselves to solve all our problems, whether it comes to civil liberties or whether it comes to taking care of people or providing a situation, providing a condition where people can thrive on their own and feel good about it. That's what we need. We need more people convinced that free markets and personal liberty can solve our problems right now. It's not working too well, but I think that is the principle. Government should be there to preserve liberty. Government it should not be there to pretend it knows how to take care of us, because they can't even start to do that without taking away more of your liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.